Hello and welcome to another episode of MNM Mindset and Muscle. In today's video, we are going to be kicking off a new series. So we just wrapped up the series of the top 3 do's and don'ts for each muscle group. So if you haven't already seen those videos, make sure you check them out, especially on any muscle groups you may need assistance bringing up and maximizing the growth of. For this series, we're going to be focusing less on individual muscles and more on the overall general scope of things that I see in the gym. And we're going to start off with some big mistakes, some common training errors that I see in the gym all the time on a daily basis. So I'm going to address these. So if you notice yourself doing them, you can be a little bit more aware of the mistakes you may be making, how to correct them, and therefore how to make much better progress in the gym and make sure you're maximizing each and every exercise rather than compromising your gains. So without further ado, we are going to jump into 6 common training mistakes that I see in the gym and how to go about fixing them and making sure that you're aware of the proper way to perform them or correct those mistakes. I just realized that sentence didn't make any sense. Starting off, a common mistake I see, in fact, one of the most common mistakes I see is using too much body momentum or swinging to move the weight. A lot of people, especially beginners, but I also see a lot of older people in the gym making this mistake as well, seem to think that just moving as heavy of a weight from point A to point B as many times as possible is what is going to stimulate the most muscle growth, while this is not the case. In fact, if you are swinging and using a lot of momentum, you're actually going to be taking away from the muscle that is supposed to be doing the work, such as in this example of barbell curls. First off, curling in the squat rack, questionable in itself, but it was pretty dead this Sunday, so I felt I'd demonstrate over here. But I see this form of curling all the time, and this form of body language. Lateral raises are another common exercise I see a lot of swinging on, where really you're using the lower back, the legs, the swinging to drive the weight up, or like I'm demonstrating here, you're not even really bending at the arms. You're kind of just moving the weight from the start to the finish without even bending your arms. So it's okay to get a few cheat reps in at the end, but you never want to start a set like this. And if you are doing cheat reps, while they may be explosive, you still want to maintain control and you still want to take the exercise through a full range of motion, which this right here is not. Here's a much more controlled variation of what a bicep curl should actually look like. Squeezing the weight up and taking about twice the amount of time to lower the weight to the bottom. It doesn't have to be uber slow, it's just all about control, squeezing at the top, and controlling the negative back down. You'll notice very little movement in my body. I'm focusing all the motion on squeezing and flexing the arm and then straightening it all the way into the lengthened position at the top. Once I get to the point where I can't do any more perfectly strict reps, if I haven't reached failure, then I'll start to incorporate a little bit of body momentum and explosiveness as you're seeing right here. But again, this is minimal. This is just allow me to get the weight to the top and then control it back down on the negative portion of the repetition. I'm not throwing the weight up and I'm not allowing gravity to just yank the weight back down to the top position. This is a controlled form of cheating, just using those hips to drive a few extra repetitions and really push the muscle beyond where it had been before. Mistake number 2, not using a proper range of motion. So this can be misinterpreted in several ways. Full range of motion does not necessarily mean that you have to go as far apart as you can from point A to point B. In fact, if you do, you may be putting too much stress on a certain joint or tendon area. You also may be taking tension off of the targeted muscle. However, it is important to know what a full range of motion for the muscle you're looking to target is. The most common mistakes that I see this being made on, or the most common exercises I see this mistake being made on, are on squats and bench presses. Squats and leg presses as well, I see all the time where people load up a ton of weight and they're not even able to get to 90 degrees. Or if they are getting to 90 degrees, they're bending so far forward in their lower back that really they're turning it more into a glute and low back exercise, even though they're trying to work their legs. I also see this all the time in bench press, where people put on too much weight, barely get their elbows to 90 degrees, and then press back up, where they're missing the most important part of the load on the chest in that stretched position that really triggers the most muscle growth, scientifically speaking. I'll go ahead and demonstrate what I'm talking about in this squat. Poor range of motion is common on a lot of exercises, but squats are where I see it the most, squats and leg presses. So I'll demonstrate here on this hack squat. Really, this isn't too terrible of a range of motion, but you're not getting nearly as much out of the exercise as you could be if you drop all the way into a deep squat. Here's a slightly more common variation I see of really missing out on gains. Unless your goal is to train for a great vertical leap, you want to make sure you're getting a full range of motion all the way down. So for maximal muscle growth, bottom out and then come all the way to the top. Go beyond the 90 degrees shown here, and certainly go beyond the 45 or so degrees demonstrated right here. I hate it when I see people load up so much weight and then look like they're just going to injure their spine lifting with their ego, because I know they're not going to get the full maximal benefit out of the exercise. Here's a demonstration of full range of motion, coming all the way down to the bottom, brief pause at the bottom just before hitting those racks that catch you, and then driving back up to the top. And this is really critical, getting that knee flexion and extension to really build the quads. Now, if you have any sort of knee issues or limitations, obviously you have to train around this, whether it's doing a different exercise or limiting the range of motion slightly. That's up to you as an individual feel. But if you have healthy tendons and ligaments, and in the exercise allows you to use a full range of motion, take advantage of it. Get strong in every inch of that range of motion to maximize your gains. You may think that you're using more weight and able to progressively overload faster by cheating, but you're only cheating yourself out of the muscle mass you could otherwise accrue if you were using proper form in a full range of motion. The reason why I like to use a hack squat or a Smith machine squat is because it allows me, even in the repetitions close to failure, to keep using that full range of motion, because I know even if I fail down at the bottom, as I will here soon on one of these repetitions, then the catches will stop me from completely failing and just crushing myself. If you're using a squat, it's important not to go to true failure, because otherwise you're just going to injure yourself. Mistake number 3 that I see on the daily is allowing a bigger, stronger muscle group to come in and take over an exercise at the expense of the muscle you're trying to train. This results in some form of Frankenstein type exercise, whereas you're trying to do a certain isolation movement, it turns into something like this example of tricep pushdowns. This is one of the more common exercises I see butchered in this way, the tricep extension, where people turn it into a lat crunch tricep Frankenstein exercise. They bend down at the waist to allow them to throw the exceptional heavy weight, getting the abs way more engaged than they need to be, and using the lats almost in some sort of straight arm pullover wreck of a movement, taking a lot of tension off their triceps. If you're using form like this, make sure you catch yourself, lighten up the weight, and check your form so you're able to actually engage the muscle. The exercise is supposed to look like this. Body is rock solid, exercise form is slow and controlled as always, all the extending and the flexion is in the elbows. You'll notice my elbows aren't leaving my sides, as I demonstrated in the incorrect way to do this exercise. They're staying stationary, they're just bending and extending. If you notice your elbows swinging out in front of your body and then behind your body, or bending at the hips, rounding the spine and flexing just to try and use heavier weight, then that is a sure sign that you're ego lifting and you're using other muscles to accomplish the exercise that you're trying to train a certain muscle group with. In this case, triceps. Next, failing to control the negative or control the weight at all. I see this all the time. Again, common exercises I see this on are leg extensions, bench presses, exercises where people will load up the weight. They'll use an explosive motion to drive the weight to the top, and then really the weight is too heavy for them to actually hold and statically contract at the top or control on the negative down. Remember, the static portion of a rep, that contraction at the top, is scientifically speaking a stronger mechanical position than the positive or raising of the rep. So if you can lift the weight, but you can't hold it at the top with a static contraction, or you can't control it on the way down, that means you're not really lifting the weight just with the muscle you're trying to use. You are using some form of momentum or cheating to get that weight up and taking tension off the muscle you're looking to train. I'll show you exactly what I mean in this example of leg extensions. Failing to control the repetition, especially the negative, is something I see on a lot of exercises. Leg extensions is one of the main offenders. I'll see people reaching near failure and they'll struggle to squeeze the weight up to the top as I'm showing here, and then just allow gravity to yank them down to the bottom position. Now this is canceling out half of the repetition at this point, and the stronger mechanically part of the repetition. If you're reaching the point where you can't get any more repetitions up on the positive, you still have strength left on the static or the negative portion of the rep. And if you're not controlling that negative portion of the rep, you're not taking advantage of that extra strength reserve that you have, and therefore you're not training as intensely or thoroughly as you could be. Here I am demonstrating proper form, where rather than throwing the weight up, I'm squeezing it up. I'm trying to pause and contract at the top of every single repetition, even just for a second, and then my general rule of thumb is that I want to take about twice as long to lower the weight as it takes me to raise the weight. This varies a little bit from exercise to exercise, and it's important to find what works best for you, but that's a good general rule of thumb to start with. If it takes you a half a second to raise the weight, then it should take you at least a second to lower the weight. If it takes you a second to raise the weight, it should take you at least 2 seconds to lower the weight. This applies to most exercises and will allow you to work that negative portion that much more intensely, as it is the stronger position. If you're not doing it this way, then you almost need a training partner to help you work that negative portion once your positive portion of the repetition has failed, as you would need somebody to assist you on raising the weight up to the top and then slowly lowering it down to the bottom. By training in this fashion, taking more time and working the negative portion harder, as it is the stronger portion, you exhaust both the negative and the positive in the same time in the set. And once you reach the end of the set, both areas of muscle are thoroughly fatigued and you don't need to do any forced repetitions. So this is an ideal way to train if you don't have a training partner, and an ideal way to train in general to maximize muscle stimulation. Give it a try and you'll see how much more challenging and humbling it is, but also how much deeper you feel the contraction in every single rep of the muscle, and how much better results you get out of each exercise you do. Next, we have bouncing the weight or speeding through the repetitions at the expense of actually controlling and feeling the repetitions. So I am all for explosive reps on certain exercises. However, there's a difference between explosive training where you're still getting a good contraction and in control of the weight, and just bouncing through the repetitions mindlessly. I see this all the time on calf raises. This is the biggest offender I see with this exercise, but I also see it on deadlifts, rack pulls, things like that, where people are just kind of bouncing the weight off the bottom, going up to the top. Leg presses, I see this all the time, where even if somebody's using a full range of motion, they're just kind of slingshotting the weight back and forth and not really allowing the muscle to do the work. They're allowing that compressed rubber band effect of the ligaments and tendons to slingshot the weight from the bottom and get you back up to the top. But like I said, I see this by far the most on calf raises, and this is one of the biggest reasons why I see everybody who does this has very small calves. So check out this example here. Bouncy reps on the calf raise. Even if you're using full range of motion as I'm demonstrating here, or the shorter, choppier range of motion that I often see demonstrated here, then you're not going to be getting the most out of the exercise with these bouncy repetitions. If anything, you're just going to be stressing the Achilles tendon rather than actually stressing the calf muscle. When you're training calves, it's important to use a full range of motion. It's important to control the weight as always, but it's important to take any momentum and bounce out of the exercise. You don't want to slingshot out of the bottom. You want to squeeze at the top, pause for a split second to take momentum out of that, and then come down to the stretch, hold the stretch for a second at the bottom to take any momentum out again before squeezing back up. This will ensure that the calves are loaded the entire range of motion of the exercise, and you're not allowing the tendons to just act as rubber bands, stretching and snapping you from rep to rep and bouncing out those repetitions. It always shocks me when I see people do a set of 15 calf raises and it takes them about 10 seconds to do the entire set. If I'm doing 15 calf raises, it should take over a minute to complete this set, which just goes to show how fast and choppy a lot of people train their calves. Slow down, utilize that time under tension, maximize the squeeze, maximize the stretch, and kill that momentum, as it just takes away from the muscle growth. And finally, not locking your body in position. This is a common mistake I see as well, where people are not allowing their body to be anchored and stable, and therefore able to channel maximum tension and stress through the muscle they're looking to target. They'll be squirming all around on the machine, just trying to duck and dive their way under the weight as they struggle to drive it up. I see this a lot of times on certain shoulder press machines, chest press machines, sometimes on lat pull downs, sometimes on leg press or squatting exercises where people are going too heavy, and rather than keeping their body rock steady, moving up and down, fluid motion like a piston, they're squirming around trying to get a little bit of extra leverage. This is a huge mistake that not only takes tension off the muscles, but also costs your body a lot of unnecessary extra energy just trying to stabilize those convulsions and squirmings, so that you're going to be getting less out of the muscle and very likely less repetitions out of the set. Though you may think by straining and struggling and squirming, you're channeling more power, you're actually giving yourself a lot less. The squirmies. I see this all the time where people aren't locked in, and this is especially on the last few repetitions where I'll see people wiggling and flailing to try and get the weight to the top. This is taking tension off of, in this exercise, off of the chest and placing it on the shoulders and the triceps and a lot of tendons and ligaments in the rotator cuff just to try and squeeze out a couple extra repetitions. Not only are you weakening yourself here and taking yourself out of that powerful locked and loaded position, but you're opening yourself up to injury and not really doing anything with these last few reps. Another thing is the flailing of the legs. This is a big no on any sort of exercise, as it takes away your stability and you're able to channel power through the exercise. Think of your body as one of those fire engines or cranes where the stabilizers come out from the side and anchor onto the ground. This way, when the arm of the ladder is extended up to the top, the stabilizers from the side provide power, stability, and drive into the ground to allow the truck to remain stable. If one of those legs were to come off the ground, or both, the fire truck or crane would tip over and come crashing down. It's the same thing here. For some reason, when people bench press, if they're struggling for the last rep, they think by lifting their feet off the ground, it's going to help them generate more power, when it does the opposite. It kills your balance and kills your power. This is an example of an exercise where I'm locked in. Everything is strict and controlled. My butt isn't coming off the pad. I'm not squirming around on the back seat or adjusting myself every repetition or adjusting my feet. I'm in a powerful position the entire time, and it's allowing me to use a full range of motion, come all the way down, hold for a brief pause, and then drive back up to the top, as in I'm trying to push my back into the pad the whole time. That's a good cue to think of. Whether you're doing a chest press, shoulder press, or a leg press, try and think of yourself as trying to push yourself into the pad as hard as you can. Obviously, there are many, many more mistakes and good things and all of that that I see in the gym, but these are the 6 that we're going to cover for today. I wanted to go over kind of the mechanical issues I see, things that you may be doing with your form that I can help bring awareness to and allow you to correct to maximize your gains, because that is my goal, is to see everybody be able to maximize their gains, maximize their potential, and have the safest, best, most intense gym experience that they can and fall in love with this sport. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching. As always, if you have any questions, comments, please leave them down below. I love to hear from you and I will answer you as soon as I can. I always try and respond to my comments. Again, thank you so much for watching, and as always, I look forward to seeing you in the next video.